High Counselor Zarlvrin's tentacles twisted in agitation as he surveyed the gathered representatives of the Galactic Council's most advanced civilizations. His chrome-plated exoskeleton reflected the emergency lights that had been flashing for the past 3 rotation cycles, creating an almost disco-like atmosphere in the usually dignified council chambers. Not that any of these beings knew what disco was. Yet. So let me summarize our current situation, he said, his translation matrix giving his words a crisp, aristocratic tone. Our flagship, the stellar dawn pride of the Council fleet, pinnacle of our combined technological achievement, and current holder of the most aesthetically pleasing vessel award 6 cycles running, is broken. Chief Engineer Kib P.O., a floating mass of crystalline structures arranged in a roughly humanoid shape, pulsed with embarrassment. Broken is such a primitive term, High Counselor. The stellar dawn's quantum neural pathway matrix has experienced a cascading failure that's resulted in a complete shutdown of all primary, secondary, and tertiary systems. His crystals flickered in different patterns as he spoke, creating a light show that would put any Earth rave to shame. So, it's broken, stated Security Director Raxa, her scaled skin shifting through various shades of exasperation. As the only reptilian in the room, she had a reputation for calling things exactly what they were, much to everyone's discomfort. The council chamber erupted into a cacophony of protests, suggestions, and what possibly counted as insults in at least 17 different languages. The translation matrix struggled to keep up, occasionally spitting out phrases like "your maternal unit's gravitational mass is questionable," and "may your electrons spontaneously decay." Zarlvrin raised 4 of his tentacles, demanding silence. The Rigelian Engineering Corps has attempted repairs. Failed. Kib Po's crystals dimmed slightly, the quantum mechanics of Betelgeuse. They took one look and filed for early retirement. The mechanical hive mind of Tau Ceti, still in therapy. Even the Zorblaxian tech priests. They declared the ship cursed and performed an exorcism. It didn't help. Zarlvrin's tentacles drooped. The Stellar Dawn wasn't just a ship, it was a symbol of the Council's unity and technological supremacy. Currently scheduled for the grand ceremonial tour of the newly discovered civilizations, including that backwater dirtball called Earth, the ship's failure was more than just a mechanical problem, it was a political catastrophe waiting to happen. Perhaps. Ventured Raxa, her scales now showing a pattern that indicated either deep thought or indigestion. We're approaching this from the wrong angle. The ship's systems are based on the combined knowledge of our most advanced civilizations. We've tried our best minds. Our most sophisticated approaches. She paused, her tongue flicking out in what might have been amusement. Maybe we need something less sophisticated. The council chamber went so quiet you could have heard a quantum particle drop. Are you suggesting, Kib Po's crystals pulsed in horror, that we ask one of the primitive species for help? The humans, Raxa said firmly, have a peculiar knack for fixing things, especially when they shouldn't be able to. The emergency lights continued their rhythmic flashing, now accompanied by the collective sound of dozens of alien species trying to process this seemingly preposterous suggestion. The council's gravity-controlled doors whooshed open with their usual dramatic flair. But what walked through them was anything but usual. Alexandra Rodriguez, better known as Alex to anyone who wanted to keep their fingers intact, strode into the chamber wearing steel-toed boots, oil-stained coveralls, and the kind of grin that suggested she found the universe's most sophisticated technology adorably cute. So she announced, dropping a battered red toolbox that echoed through the chamber like a declaration of war. "I hear you've got a ship that won't start." Kib Po's crystalline structure practically vibrated with indignation. The Stellar Dawn is experiencing a catastrophic failure of its quantum neural. Yeah, Alex waved her hand, cutting through the technical jargon like a acetylene torch through butter. "Won't start." "Got it." Security Director Raxa's scales rippled with what might have been amusement as several council members visibly recoiled from the humans' casual dismissal of their technological terminology. High Counselor Zarlvrin's tentacles curled inward, the equivalent of a raised eyebrow. "MS. Rodriguez," he began, his translation matrix struggling to maintain its dignified tone. "You do understand that this vessel represents the pinnacle of..." "Listen." "Well, listen," Alex interrupted, pulling a wrench from her pocket and twirling it with the casual expertise of a gunslinger. I fixed everything from rusty pickup trucks to experimental fusion reactors. A ship's a ship. Now, are we going to stand here measuring tentacles? Or can I take a look at your fancy space boat?" The chamber erupted into scandalized murmuring. The Arcturian ambassador fainted dead away. Someone in the back started reciting what sounded suspiciously like last rites. But Raxa was already moving toward the exit, her scales now displaying a pattern that definitely meant amusement. "Follow me, human. Let's see what your primitive tools can do." Alex hefted her toolbox, threw a mock salute at the assembled dignitaries, and followed the reptilian security director. As she passed Kib P.O., she couldn't resist adding, "Nice light show, by the way. You should see what you can do with some lead strips and Arduino." The crystalline engineer's response was thankfully lost in the translation matrix's sudden fit of diplomatic censorship. The Stellar Dawn's engine room looked like someone had taken every sci-fi movie ever made, stuck them in a blender, and hit puree. Holographic displays floated everywhere, showing diagrams that would give an Earth physicist a migraine. Tubes of mysterious liquids pulsed with otherworldly light, and something in the corner was definitely breaking several laws of thermodynamics. As you can observe, Kib-Po's crystals pulsed in a lecture mode pattern. The quantum neural pathways have experienced a severe degradation of their probability matrices, leading to a cascading failure in the ship's consciousness network. Alex nodded, pulled out a flashlight from her toolbox, and crawled under the nearest console. The consciousness network, of course, is integral to maintaining the quantum coherence of the ship's higher functions. Another engineer, a blob of blue goo named Blurp, contributed helpfully. Without it, the probability waves cannot properly collapse, leading to a state of quantum uncertainty that... Hey, Alex's voice echoed from under the console. "Quick question. When was the last time anyone actually looked at the physical components of this thing?" The engineers exchanged baffled looks. Rax's scales shifted to her. This is going to be good pattern. Physical components, Kib-Po's crystals flickered in confusion. The Stellar Dawn operates primarily on quantum principles. The physical layer is merely a formality, a concession to the crude laws of conventional physics. A muffled laugh came from under the console. "Yeah? Tell that to this burnt-out power coupling." Alex slid out, grease already smudged on her cheek, holding up what looked like a perfectly ordinary piece of metal. Well, ordinary if you ignored the fact it was glowing slightly and humming a tune that sounded suspiciously like "Never Gonna Give You Up." "But that's impossible," Blurp bubbled indignantly. "The quantum consciousness should have automatically compensated for any physical degradation through probability manipulation and quantum tunneling effects." "Look," Alex said, standing up and wiping her hands on her coveralls. "I don't care if your ship runs on quantum magic, fairy dust, or good vibes. Electricity still needs a clean path to flow. And this coupling is corroded worse than a '92 Honda Civic in a salt belt state." She pointed her flashlight at a series of similar couplings running along the wall. "See these? They're all showing signs of wear. Your fancy quantum consciousness probably tried to compensate, but that's like trying to run a marathon with a broken ankle. Sure, you might manage for a while, but eventually the entire system crashes." Raxa finished, her scales now showing an interesting mix of "I told you so" and "this is hilarious." Kib-Po's crystals had dimmed to a barely visible glow. "But our diagnostics, our quantum probability scans, our consciousness interface protocols." "Sometimes," Alex said, already digging through her toolbox, "you guys think so quantum. You forget to think simple." She pulled out a set of tools that looked positively medieval compared to the high-tech diagnostic equipment surrounding them. "Now, who wants to learn how to properly clean and reseat a power coupling?" The assembled alien engineers stared at her basic tools with expressions ranging from horror to fascination. Someone in the back definitely whispered "barbarian," but it might have been a compliment. "One more thing," Alex added, her grin widening as she inspected another coupling. "Whoever designed this system must have been familiar with Earth tech. These couplings, they're basically super advanced versions of something you'd find in any Earth vehicle, which means..." She reached into her toolbox and pulled out a bottle that made several engineers gasp in recognition. "Yep, good old-fashioned contact cleaner. Bet you anything this'll work better than quantum probability manipulation for fixing these connections." The look of absolute devastation on Kib-Po's crystalline face suggested that somewhere, somehow, the entire foundation of his engineering education was crumbling. And Alex Rodriguez, human mechanic, was holding the metaphorical sledgehammer. Alex laid out her tools with the precise care of a surgeon, if surgeons used rusty wrenches and something that looked suspiciously like a modified TV remote. The gathered alien engineers watched in horrified fascination as she pulled on a pair of thick rubber gloves. First things first, she announced, grabbing the contact cleaner and a handful of rags. We're going to clean these connections properly. None of that quantum probability nonsense. But the quantum field harmonics KIB-PO started to protest. We'll work a lot better when they're not fighting through crud and corrosion, Alex finished, already spraying down the first coupling. You know what your quantum consciousness reminds me of? Those fancy computer diagnostic systems in modern cars that tell you to replace the entire transmission when all you really need is to clean the sensors. She worked methodically, cleaning each coupling with practiced efficiency. The rags came away stained with an iridescent substance that seemed to move on its own. Well, that's not something you see every day, she muttered, carefully setting the rags aside in a containment field. Blurp oozed closer, fascination overtaking horror. Are you suggesting that our entire quantum network failed because of dirt? Not dirt, Alex corrected, now using a small wire brush with surprising gentleness. Quantum residue buildup. Your consciousness system's been working overtime trying to compensate, burning through more power than it should, creating more residue, making the problem worse, she grinned. It's basically space engine gunk. A horrified murmur ran through the watching crowd. Someone started recording the procedure, probably for future evidence in a war crimes tribunal. Now for the fun part, Alex announced, pulling out what looked like a souped-up soldering iron. These connections need to be properly redone. The quantum fields might be able to jump the gaps, but they're wasting energy doing it, like trying to run electricity through a frayed wire. That equipment is practically Stone Age, one of the engineers protested. You cannot possibly use such primitive tools on our advanced technology. Watch me, Alex replied cheerfully, flicking on her soldering iron. It hummed to life with a sound that somehow managed to be both reassuring and threatening. Sometimes the old ways are the best ways. Besides, I modified this baby myself. Added some quantum shielding I scrounged from an old translator unit. She worked with quick, precise movements, her hands steady as she repaired each connection. The aliens watched in a mix of terror and amazement as she occasionally consulted a battered tablet, muttering to herself about flow rates and resistance values. Ask me that pipe wrench, she called out to Raxa, who had been watching the whole procedure with increasing amusement. Got us stuck fitting here. Perhaps we should consult the quantum probability matrices, KIB-PO suggested weakly. Nope, Alex grunted, applying careful pressure with the wrench. Sometimes you just need good old-fashioned leverage. Besides, there was a satisfying click as the fitting came loose. I've got a feeling your probability matrices would just tell you this is impossible. She continued working, occasionally requesting tools that made the alien engineers cringe. A socket set that looked like it had survived several wars. Electrical tape that she swore was quantum-rated, it wasn't. Something she called a persuader that turned out to be a remarkably large hammer. The quantum consciousness will never accept these repairs, one of the younger engineers predicted doomfully. The probability waves. The quantum consciousness is basically a really fancy computer, Alex interrupted, now elbow deep in what appeared to be the ship's equivalent of a fuse box. And like any computer, it needs clean connections to work properly. Now, anyone got something like WD-40? No? Guess this will have to do? She pulled out a small can from her toolbox, the label worn but still readable Lucas Oil Toolbox Buddy. This stuff, she explained to her horrified audience, has saved more machines than all your quantum probability calculations combined, and if it can fix my brother's ancient Camaro, it can handle your spaceship. The next few minutes were filled with the sounds of spraying, tightening, and occasional muttered curses in both English and Spanish. Alex moved with the confidence of someone who had fixed everything from toasters to nuclear reactors, treating the advanced alien technology with the same practical respect she'd give any machine. Finally, she stepped back, wiping her hands on a rag. The engine room looked different, cleaner somehow. The holographic displays seemed sharper, the pulsing tubes more rhythmic. Even the thing in the corner that violated thermodynamics appeared to be doing so more efficiently. Okay, Alex announced, closing her toolbox with a decisive click. Time for the moment of truth. Who wants to fire her up? The entire Galactic Council had somehow crammed themselves into the engine room, creating a rainbow of bioluminescence, scales, tentacles, and crystalline structures. High Counselor Zarl-Vreen's tentacles were tied in knots of anxiety. Beginning power-up sequence, Kib Po announced, his crystals barely glowing with nervous energy. Quantum consciousness initialization in 3, 2, 1. The engine room hummed to life. Not the sickly, struggling sound they'd heard before, but a deep, healthy purr that you could feel in your bones, assuming you had bones. Primary systems engaging blurp bubbled excitedly. Power flow at 20% and rising steadily. Alex leaned against her toolbox, arms crossed, wearing the satisfied smile of every mechanic who's ever heard a broken engine run smooth again. How's your quantum consciousness doing? The holographic displays erupted with data. Streams of information cascaded through the air, forming patterns that would give an Earth mathematician a religious experience. This is impossible, Kib Po whispered, his crystals now pulsing with excitement. Power flow at 50% and rising. Quantum coherence at unprecedented levels. The consciousness matrix, it's happy. 75% power, blurp announced. 80%, 85%. The ship's systems came online one after another, each activation accompanied by a satisfying chime. Life support optimization, gravity control, probability manipulation drives. Even the quantum coffee maker in the corner sprang to life, brewing something that smelled like victory and violated several laws of physics. 100% power, blurp's gelatinous form was practically vibrating with excitement. All systems nominal. The stellar dawn is, she's purring. Of course she is, Alex said, patting the nearest console affectionately. All she needed was some proper maintenance. You guys were so focused on the quantum stuff, you forgot the basics. Clean connections, proper grounding, and a little bit of love. High Counselor Zarl-Vreen's tentacles uncurled in amazement. But the quantum probability matrices, the consciousness interface, the advanced technology, still work perfectly, Alex interrupted. They just work better now that they're not fighting through corroded connections and quantum residue buildup. It's like trying to think with a headache. Sure, you can do it, but it's not going to be your best work. The assembled council members stared at the holographic displays, watching as system after system reported optimal functionality. The ship's quantum consciousness, now running smoothly through clean connections, was performing better than its original specifications. But one of the engineers sputtered, "We spent months trying to recalibrate the quantum fields." Sometimes, Alex said, closing her toolbox with a satisfied click, the simplest solution is the right one. Your quantum consciousness is incredibly advanced, but it still needs basic maintenance. Just like how the fanciest car in the world won't run right if you never change the oil. The engine room had fallen silent, except for the healthy hum of machinery and the occasional happy beep from the quantum coffee maker. I believe Raxaxis said, her scales showing a pattern that could only be described as smugly amused. This calls for a revision of our engineering protocols. 1 standard galactic week later, the Galactic Council's main chamber was packed for an emergency session. The agenda reassessing humanity's technological classification, and more importantly, figuring out what to do about the flood of repair requests suddenly being directed at Earth's mechanics. High Counselor Zarl-Vreen, tentacles now relaxed in their natural spiral, addressed the assembly. In light of recent events, the Council proposes reclassifying Earth from charmingly primitive to surprisingly competent, all in favor. The vote was unanimous, though several members were still traumatized by watching Alex Rodriguez fix their most advanced ship with what they considered to be glorified stone tools. Furthermore, Zarl-Vreen continued, we've received 342 requests for human mechanics to review other quantum ships, 27 proposals for a galactic repair certification program, and one very strongly worded demand that we immediately share the secret of what Alex calls WD-40. Alex, now sitting in a specially designated human technical advisor chair which someone had thoughtfully equipped with a cup holder, grinned. You guys might want to wait until you see what happens when I introduce you to duct tape. The chamber erupted into chaos. The Arcturian ambassador fainted again. Order Zarl-Vreen's tentacles waved frantically. We must maintain proper diplomatic. He was interrupted by a familiar happy chime echoing through the chamber. The Stellar Dawn's quantum consciousness had apparently decided to join the discussion. A holographic display materialized, showing the ship's efficiency ratings now 143% above original specifications. See, Alex pointed at the display. All she needed was some proper maintenance. Though I still think you should consider adding a regular oil change schedule to your quantum maintenance protocols. Kib Po, whose crystals had been permanently tinted with embarrassment for the past week, floated forward. We have begun implementing MS. Rodriguez's suggestions across our fleet, though some of our engineers are still struggling with the concept of, what did you call it, percussive maintenance. Sometimes you gotta give it a good whack, Alex shrugged. Just make sure you whack it in the right spot. Security Director Raxa, whose scales now permanently displayed her "this is hilarious" pattern, stepped up to the podium. The Security Council moves to establish a new division, the Department of Practical Engineering Solutions, and we request MS Rodriguez as our first consultant. Hold up, Alex raised her hand. Before I agree to anything, we need to discuss payment. Also, I'm gonna need a bigger toolbox. And maybe someone to explain why your quantum coffee maker keeps making drinks that taste like déjà vu. The council chambers filled with laughter, or various species-appropriate expressions of amusement. Even the quantum consciousness of the stellar dawn joined in, its happiness expressed through a series of cheerful beeps and a slight violation of the laws of physics. As the meeting concluded, Zarlvreen approached Alex privately. MS Rodriguez, there's just one thing I don't understand. How did you know where to look for the problem? Alex picked up her toolbox, now adorned with several alien modification certificates and a quantum-enhanced bottle opener. Simple. In my experience, no matter how fancy the technology gets, there's always going to be a loose wire somewhere. The fancier the tech, the looser the wire. She headed for the door, then turned back with a grin. Oh, and you might want to tell your engineers to stop trying to quantum analyze that bottle of Lucas oil. It's not going to reveal the secrets of the universe. It just works. Behind her, the quantum coffee maker beeped happily and produced a drink that tasted like winning the lottery on a Tuesday. The Galactic Council would never be quite the same. But at least now their ships ran properly, even if the repair logs sometimes included entries like "hit it with the quantum-enhanced persuader until the probability matrix stopped sulking." And somewhere in the vast expanse of space, humanity's classification was officially updated from charmingly primitive to surprisingly competent approach with caution, especially if they're carrying toolboxes.